Hey Gurus, happy Friday. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you might be joining us. Welcome to the Order Management Gurus community. It's great to see some familiar faces, and then I also see some unfamiliar faces. So welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining today. My name is Jason Laffer, and I'll be your moderator for today's exciting session. Today's session is part of the Partner Power Up series, where we're going to dive deep with one partner at a time to sort of unpack and dive into the different technologies, architectures that are shaping the future of order management. If you've joined our panel discussions before, you know that we usually bring in multiple voices together. But these partner power-ups are distinctly different, and we are going deeper with just one expert who can help us understand the why and the how behind the next wave of OMS innovation. So today we're going to talk about a really important topic, and that's the hidden cost of single-tenant commerce, because traditional models of spinning up separate OMS instances for every use case, it just doesn't scale anymore. So we'll talk through why traditional single-tenant OMS deployments can create unnecessary cost and complexity, and how multi-tenant architectures can support very different retail business models on a single shared platform. And of course, at the end, we'll leave time for your questions. So please drop them in the chat throughout the conversation, and we'll again make sure to answer them on the other end of it. To explore this topic today, we're joined by somebody with a very unique perspective in the space. We're joined by Anuj Mittal, who's the chief architect at Flipkart Commerce Cloud. Anuj will tell us a little bit more about himself and Flipkart Commerce Cloud. But high level, he has spent over a decade building systems that have handled millions of daily orders across all sorts of verticals, grocery, fashion, electronics, and more. He's led the evolution of Flipkart's multi-tenant OMS platform from the ground up, and today he helps enterprise clients apply those lessons to their own operations. So with that, Anuj, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you go ahead before we dive in and tell us a little bit about yourself and Flipkart Commerce Cloud for those who may not already know?
So Flipkart, I mean, for the uninitiated, is one of the largest e-commerce players in India. And India, a geography of, now 1.3, 1.4 billion people from different cultures. And yeah, interestingly, Flipkart is, one competitor that Amazon, that's always a little ahead of Amazon in its own home territory. So, across the world. So just trying to keep up with that. And when it comes to the business use cases, we started by selling books. Then we launched digital. We became marketplace in 2013. We launched our first flagship sale event called the Big Billion Day in 2014. That was like a disrupting event in the Indian e-commerce ecosystem. Everything in Indian e-commerce system broke for good, and people started taking e-commerce really very seriously post that event. And then over the period of time, we have launched fashion, electronics. These days we sell tickets. We deliver pen in under 10 minutes. We deliver fresh vegetables. We deliver refurbished goods. And we also have, Gen Z influencers also, selling Shop the Look. So this on the business side. What it translates on the tech side in terms of scale is to serve all of these use cases to a 1.3 billion population. We are talking about 1.5 million cores. We are talking about approximately 50 to 60 petabytes of memory RAM. The size of infrastructure that's working. We are talking about thousands of petabytes of disk size. We're talking about 40 Gbps of network word traffic for people browsing on e-commerce. So that's the kind of scale, and we are talking about millions of orders per day. And also at peak we are 3,000, 4,000 orders per second, successful orders that people place, and sometimes it's a million plus people concurrently browsing the website. So that's this kind of scale we are talking about at Flipkart. And at Flipkart Commerce Cloud specifically, we are taking, all of this decade past of learning, knowledge, and robust technology that we have built. and we are trying to understand problems of retailers all across the globe and trying to provide solutions to them and making our stack even more flexible for their use cases. So that's roughly about it. I hope that's a good summary.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. Thank you for providing that context for everyone. So great, thank you for that. And I just wanted to remind folks a quick bit of housekeeping is again, we'll have a Q&A at the other side of this conversation. But if anything that sparks a question throughout the conversation, feel free to drop it into the chat, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. And you can come off mute, ask it yourself, or I'm happy to run through it. So. Without further ado, let's kick it off and let's dive into it. So, many companies are replacing their order management systems right now. I'm sure there's folks in the audience who are undergoing this process themselves. So, I just wanted to ask you what specific OMS limitations are necessitating these replacements, and what have you seen?
Wow, that's a big one. Okay, let me try to summarize. So actually, you're right. Recently, there has been a study that it's probably a $4 billion market that's increasing 7% year on year, and 30% of that market is looking to replace their OMS solution that exists. And the reasons can be plenty. There are order management systems that are still running on traditional monolithic stacks. They are not at web scale truly. Uh, but these are some of the things that are table stakes now, when we talk about modern technology. Uh, just giving Flipkart example, starting from there, in 2007, 8, we were selling books. Then, in India, we were the first ones, even before Amazon came in, we were the first ones to launch ebooks and music. In 2013, we turned a marketplace model where we allowed third-party sellers to come in and sell. 2014, we had at that time, smartphone revolution in India coincided with this e-commerce disruption. So that cycle we followed, and so on and so forth. So starting from selling books to selling everything under the hood today. I mean, not everything, but what people commonly buy, to 2 to 3 days deliveries. From there to 10-minute delivery, to selling fresh vegetables, to having different kind of experiences for fashion, electronics. Uh, so what has happened, over a period of time, what we have seen is different business use cases have become or have taken prominence, and your technology has followed to solve for them. And what has happened over a period of time, and even in our experience, a single ecosystem with such a wide variety of use case always hits limitations, because that's not what it was originally designed for. And when we hit these limitations, typically we have done so, and that's what happens in the industry. People look for multiple OMS solutions, but that's even worse. So you end up being saying there is a single order management system that's probably hitting limitations, with more and more of such use cases coming in, and technology reaching more and more people, scale becoming the need of the hour, and at the same time you don't want to fragment. So that's, let's say, one of the key development beyond your technical limitations, that has caused certain solutions out there that have been there for years to have limitations. And if I also try to overlay how OMS has evolved, right, what has been its inflection points. When we started, probably a decade or 2 decades back, order management system was very simply, it should be able to accept an order, capture a successful order, record the transaction, keep that snapshot, and should be available for fulfillment systems to fulfill. And then later, fulfillment systems will, our operations team will provide status, update the status in OMS, and the customer will be able to track. So it was more of a plumbing thing. uh, Fast forward, you had a distributed OMS era where your fulfillment centers, DCs, warehouses became multifold, right? And that required different orchestration. So then OMS had to start orchestrating things. And now in the current era, it's not just about operational orchestration, but it is about optimizing also, where your delivery cost should go down, your customer promise and experience should still remain the same. I think the traditional OMSs have been trying to put in extensions or band-aid, whereas I think at each of these inflection points, there's a need to think grounds up differently so that you could have one solution that can solve for all of these use cases. So I feel that may be, your primary reasons why most of them are looking out.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a lot of, quick fixes and that there's band-aids that are being put over the current model is what you're seeing. And you're saying fundamentally, people have to rethink how they're thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it became like a tracking system. It was originally designed as a tracking system. Then it had to reinvent itself as an orchestrating system. And now it probably has to reinvent itself as also an optimizing system. So
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is, when you see large enterprises that need to handle, and this is different a little bit from the retail that you were initially talking about, but when you're seeing these enterprises that need to handle, the B2B sales, and consumer operations, marketplace functionality, all the different kind of components there, where have you seen, specific order management processes that are breaking down first? Like where it is the first, break point?
well, Jason, frankly, the cracks are in the pre-order journey itself. Right, even before you place the order, the way your inventory, starting just from that the inventory that is available to promise, the inventory that is available to ship, uh, because of these multiple channels, which are probably, let's say in a marketplace, some channels are owned by you as the marketplace owner, some channels are not owned by you, or it's a B2B or a B2C experience. So given your inventory is fragmented and there is a real need of real-time aggregation of that inventory, if that does not happen well, the cracks show up there because what you promise at the time of taking the order versus what is the ground reality at the time of fulfillment, there's a huge gap. And then again, the same philosophy, your band-aids, your patch fixes come in. How do you group the orders so that, your customer promise date is met? And you are able to also take in care of the cost. So these are, counter forces, counter force playing together. And if you have not optimized for it, you will run into more exception scenarios. The other thing, I think what we were just mentioning, right, because of these band-aids and fixes that we have done, what happens is software is trying to extend itself, it is trying to stretch itself and dictate what's on the ground. Right. And therefore, it's also, while it's enabling certain things, to a certain extent, but it is also passing down the system constraints to the workforce and the systems and, your other partnering systems on the ground. Whereas, when we talk about this reinvention, right, that's where, it should play out, where the ground realities should also surface to the system, and system should just be an enabler, and, you have business policies and rules that decide the workflow. So instead of being unidirectional, that, an order management is only capable of this, hence on the ground, you can only do this. It has to be a bi-directional system, and, you need to take that feedback up and surface that, well. So I think that is the key area. And then post fulfillment as well, right? You talk about substitutions because you did not have inventory. You talk about different places from which you can fulfill, different fulfillment strategies, grouping. I think all of those get amplified because your fundamentals or your fundamental knowledge when you are placing an order, that gets distorted pretty quickly in the post fulfillment world. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, the title of this presentation is the hidden costs, right, of running a single tenant. So I would be remiss to not talk about costs and what the financial impact of some of these breakdowns are. So in your sort of opinion, what have you sort of seen as the real cost of running sort of separate OMS instances for B2B versus B2C order processing workflows?
Yeah. So see, I feel the real costs are not your license costs. Uh, let's say you have a generous vendor. Let's say, you have FCC as your generous vendor, and FCC is giving you, you buy B2C OMS, and we provide B2B OMS as free of cost, right? And we say, oh, wow, the problem is commercial, right? It gets solved. No, but that's not the cost. The cost is post that. And that's where, uh, uh, we usually seen people they prefer that, but then the long-term implications of it are the ones that actually slows down your innovation and make the cost prohibitive. Because the moment you have two OMSs, right, and we talk about, your ops force has to be trained twice. You allow the thinkers in the system to say grounds up, okay, these are different use cases, let me just think of them as uh, grounds up different primitives. Whereas an order is an order, whether I place for B2B, B2C, it should not exist. If a return or a cancellation happens, a certain orchestration needs to happen. So there are a lot of primitives that have remained constant when we see across all of these use cases, and they need to be maintained. But you will have your training, you will have, so then every one feature that you ask for in the new age, it becomes n projects, because you have n instances behaving in n different ways. So the cost of maintaining parity, having cross pollination, having compliance, QA, the whole cycle of testing, releasing, all of that becomes slower down if you fundamentally say, okay, every use case I need to literally have a different OMS, and those are your hidden costs that really cost you in the long run. And just taking a parallel example from the industry, right? I think Southwest Airlines there in the US, right? It famously kept one aircraft family, Boeing 737, for long, to run its operations, because they could move fast, they could keep the costs lower, and the cost of training for safety, operations, etc., that remained the same. Now, if you want to keep three OMS, that's like having three aircrafts for the same purpose. You're not achieving something really big, but you end up paying 3x the cost. So, you know, that those are, in my opinion, the real hidden costs.
Interesting. I appreciate that analogy too. Okay. So moving on to the next question, why can't traditional OMS architectures handle unified inventory optimization and order routing across different business models? You want to dive into that?
Yeah, I think we touched upon this, right? As your distributed OMS era evolved, right? First, you had your different kind of fulfillment centers that came up. Then, as you expand your geographic sourcing, regional utilization, you had different sources of inventory, that came up. And the traditional architectures actually did not treat themselves as a single brain in the system that should have an inventory view across the board. Now, what that leads to is an inventory fragmentation, and it's beyond inventory fragmentation. The same thing: labor, capacity, prioritization. Across business flows. Let's say you had inventory in a certain context and that's not getting sold, but in a different context or a use case, the same inventory can be utilized. So it's like, the operating system where, you had these conflicts. Operating system, as different programs and softwares ask for memory, your memory gets fragmented over a period of time. But OS being a single brain, it does a cleanup job and defragments it. But your traditional architectures, unless they realize that we have to do this job and they are not designed for it, you end up with this fragmentation problem, which leads to a lot of conflicts and low utilization.
Okay, so then if you could sort of redesign it all from scratch, what would that look like to avoid the fragmentation?
So I think same, right? Like OMS, I mean, at the end of the day, the idea is you have all information coming as, your event streams to a single place. Your single brain, OMS has to feel that it's a single brain. It's not just an orchestrator. It's optimizing itself. It's treating all the inventory from all the sources. It has a common view, and it is able to adjust with its policies and rules, saying, if the cost guardrails are met, they are not getting violated. Your business is ready to, also spend, but keep customer experience intact. A single view allows you to source inventory from different places. Similarly, if your large part of your workforce is, let's say, unutilized for a certain, in a warehouse for a certain category, it's unutilized. How quickly are you able to get that information and repurpose them for the category that's selling hot? So it's most about that. A single, your OMS is getting a view, and it is actually orchestrating based on the number of orders that it is getting. If your inventory system is isolated, it does not have a view of what's the order rate, what's the fulfillment rate, is there a build up, right? So this common brain is, again, not just orchestrating, but it is optimizing. It is able to send these signals across the funnel and solve for that problem.
Okay, that's great. Um, okay, so that sort of brings me to my next question, which is what sort of specific OMS capabilities should operations teams be testing for to identify and if their current systems, can handle the multi-business models complexity, right? Something that, Flipkart, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with, right?
No, yeah, I hope. So you're basically asking me to put a buyer's hat to the equation, and I hope our buyers don't ask for it. But if I was truly a buyer, and this is more even from an architect point of view, right? Just testing the core design. So we should, in my opinion, do two tests. One is what I call a shopkeeper test. One is a monsoon Mumbai test. I call this. So, shopkeeper test is as simple as, if you want to sell one pen to one customer instantly, right? Like a shopkeeper does, what input as a buyer I need to give to your solution to make that happen? And if that ends up being very complex, then your OMS or the solution has a certain bias. And eventually, if their vision or their roadmap is not towards removing that bias, then as you get your more business use cases, it'll probably be a bespoke customization, right? That a simplest test case, a hello world kind of a test case, is not that trivial, to onboard. So that's on one side of things. On the other side of things, let's say in India, your quick commerce has boomed, right? Like, and we can pick up any use case. So, the other side of the equation is, let's say it's a city like Mumbai, which is, very crowded. Your last mile delivery routes are not, even if you optimize, but even Google Maps finds it hard to find the right paths. So let's say if you are buying a notebook and a pen and you have a 30-minute delivery, let's say in one hub, you only have a pen, you don't have the notebook. In the other hub, you don't have a notebook, but you have a reasonable soft cover book, which could be a substitution. And then little far away, you have both of them. But because it's raining, the time the delivery person may take may be longer. So you have these scenarios, right? And now in such a scenario, how will your OMS take a decision, right? And you've, let's say, given it policies, etc. And you're also, let's say, you can leverage AI to decide based on past data, and it can optimize. So if you're able to solve such a use case, so the idea is not to pick one over the other, but can your OMS give different outcomes based on different policies in the same scenario, right? I think that would again be a test that, yes, I mean, it may not give the right result, but at least your solution is configurable to provide the right policies and provide that right input there. There is another way we can play it out, right? Like a B2B or a B2C. Let's say I, as a user, as a shopper, orders 3 iPhones. Now, because I can return one of them, and for legal compliance reasons, you probably need to track that order at each item unit level. You can't say iPhone quantity 3 because each of them may have a different IMEI number. And if I return one, which one have I returned? So you need to track in this use case at the most granular level. But in a B2B use case, if I'm ordering 1,000 units of iPhone, then probably IMEI tracking is a overkill. Or if I'm, let's say, ordering 1,000 bricks, it's an overkill. Again, can your policy engine on the same core stack primitives like order item unit, can your policy and rules change the workflows? In one case, you track at a unit level. In other case, you track it, at a item level, and then pour in little bit AI, the flavor of the day. And you can have these use cases now where in B2B, let's say I'm selling, 10 costliest diamond sets. Now, I definitely want to track them individually. Uh, and on the other side, B2C, I'm probably ordering 100 tomatoes. Now, I don't want to track each individual tomato. So now can your AI come in and change the policy, which is your default policy of B2C and B2B based on the kind of the business use case that you have within that, right? So this is probably a little forward-looking view, and a solution that solves for it will truly stand apart from the rest of the traditional solutions.
No, and I appreciate that you did touch upon AI because I feel like that's the buzzword flavor of the day, whatever it might be. It's hard to kind of escape AI and specific use cases for AI as it relates. So I'm glad you kind of touched that. And I guess in the same vein of being a little bit future looking and in the future, what sort of complexities do you think in the next like 3 to 5 years, some of these OMS platforms should be thinking about today? And what would you sort of like to see in that vein?
Yeah, I think in the world of AI, right, it is hard for me to be the astrologer that can predict what will happen in next 3 to 5 years. But yeah, I think with AI, right, we just discussed, it is an inflection point, right? And we discussed about the journey from orchestration to optimization. I think that journey was being in form of configuration and rules, and we were externalizing those rules. Those could be written as certain DSLs, but optimization in the world of AI again means something different, and that's also an inflection point. So now, how do we optimize? How best we can optimize without humans coming in the loop? For example, you have a sales season, or a certain store, let's say in an omni context, uh, is heavily loaded. You have a lot of shoppers coming in, but you have a store nearby which is not heavily loaded, but you are still getting delivery orders. Now, instead of someone manually telling, let me, a business ops person coming in and updating the rules, hey, that store is empty. At least I can, if not my pickups, but I can route my deliveries to the next store, in the radius, and I can still meet my promised dates, and it is not crossing my boundaries. I think those intelligence, right, by the time a human in the loop will react to it, versus how, with power of AI, how the system itself can do it, I think that will be very interesting to see, how it plays out, right, and takes certain decisions that meets, certain outcome, yeah, with guardrails, right. On the other hand, we could unleash AI, but it could take some decisions which could be very disruptive, and your business may get killed. But the guardrails are also important in that. So how do we have this hybrid where there is certain logic that's acting as a guardrail, and AI is there just to give us different outcomes, and we choose which one works for us. So I think that would be interesting to see. The other thing what interestingly is playing out is the true omni-channel experience does not exist. There are many companies that may claim omni, but their POS systems versus what's online, that's not in sync. And it's not, if I have some certain items in cart, can I go to a POS nearby, check it out very seamlessly? Can I get the same offers, loyalty across the channel, right? I think that would be another dimension to this that would play out, because I think it's a cycle. While people enjoy e-commerce, but then in more and more people, at least across the globe, also want to get that touch and feel, when you're talking about fresh vegetables, you're talking about jewelry. So how does that world come together to solve for true omni-channel experience? That would be also very interesting to see.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think we've reached the point in today's discussion where we're going to open it up to, anybody in the audience that might have some questions. So it didn't look like I saw any come through the chat, so feel free. Oh, I take that back. There's one in the chat. What are some of the, hang on. What are some of the key differentiators that Flipkart OMS has over other OMSs like IBM Sterling, Manhattan, Kibo, OneStock, etc.?
Okay, that's a pretty wide one. So I think, top of my head, I, I cannot do a feature-wise comparison. But, again, just talking about primitives, I think in Flipkart itself, our order management journey, right, has been with its own learnings. I think one of the key differentiators, and if I may, and I could be wrong, right, because I don't know the history for each one of them. I may know each one of them at some point in time, and because the solutions evolve so rapidly, so I may not be up to date. Small disclaimer. But what has worked for Flipkart OMS is, at each of these inflection points, like I said, right, like we started by selling books, and now we are selling air tickets. We are delivering groceries in under 10 minutes. We are delivering iPhones under 10 minutes. I think, given the base architecture and the design, at each of these inflection points, we have been able to reinvent ourselves while keeping the current business running. So the pace of evolution or the pace of change, if I were to say, I'll not call it the best in the industry, right? For obvious reasons, right? Like big organization, etc. But your fundamentally product and tech nuances, your interfaces with the rest of the ecosystem, they were pristine. Your core entities, what do you call an order? What is an order state machine? Does an order item need to have a state machine that's tied to an order, or are they independent? I think some of these decisions that we took early, they helped us reinventing at different inflection points. That's one. The other thing, right, because at least in the Indian context, we were pushed to see the scale quite early. we actually had different kind of inflection points. So one, these were like business disruptors, but suddenly one day we had one data center, which was running out of power, and we were facing a BCP issue. Now, what happened was my pre-order journey, I needed to protect, I needed to guard my GMV, right, from a business point of view. And that just turned into initiative where we needed to actually minimize our risks by being across data centers, etc. And OMS being one interesting piece where it is actually in the e-commerce journey, actually it was the fulcrum that decoupled your user path, so as we call, in our common language, and decoupled from the fulfillment path. So that whole complexity of syncing OMS across multiple data centers and de-risking this, that actually again pushed us to design our primitives right, where the complexity of cross data centers, and then later public private, and we are able to actually on a flip of a button, we are able to switch data centers. I think all of those capabilities also pushed frontiers for us at our scale, right? That helps us to design the OMS a little better.
Okay,
I
interesting.
hope that handled.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question is from Anoop. What has been the major technical challenge in your experience while building a multi-tenant OMS solution, particularly in the context of data, be it data isolation, governance, schema management across multiple tenants, etc.?
Yeah, I think great question. Right. And I think we touched about the multi-tenant part in terms of use cases. But when it comes to data isolation, governance, compliance, I think these are now table stakes, in a sense that one, right, countries are becoming more and more, the laws and the countries are becoming more and more protective about their data. So now it's no more that I can host it in one corner of the world and have data flowing across the world, right? So I need to have localized instances that are geographically bound. So that's one factor. The other factor is, what we call as a noisy neighbor, right? That, you have your different tenants running. And even, when I say here different tenants, let's say even within Flipkart context, right? If you have, iPhones selling as hotcakes, but you have your fashion or your grocery running on the same stack, how do you guard their experience while iPhones are being sold as a hotcake, right? So I think these have been real challenges for us. How we have actually survived this tide is in terms of orchestration. It's not that we became a perfect isolated solution or a governed solution on day zero, but that journey where I could orchestrate, I could keep my API contract same, but I could orchestrate across these use cases. And as and when these use cases matured, I could understand the common patterns. I could build a core layer and then call some of these nuances as extensions and host them. Fast forwarding, so that's on the functional side of things, where each use case with its own nuance is an extension while the core remained the same. So we allow market to disrupt us, and we are not blocking business by saying, oh no, on day zero I need to have a perfect design. So we allow for this growth hack. We understand the patterns and then we isolate them. Now that combined with an interesting phenomena that happened in yesteryears around technology is containerization, right? And your whole innovations in your CI/CD and deployment. So earlier, spinning up instances, bringing up systems, it was very slow, very mechanical. With the whole containerization revolution overlaying, this business revolution, we were not shying away to say, okay, let's bring in more instances, let's horizontally scale, even if we are suboptimal. So we were able to take those decisions, even though they were suboptimal at that time, But we were able to build a sustainable model because your fundamental architecture was horizontal, and you did not shy up in bringing up multiple clusters. When you face the problem, you fix them and you again consolidate them. I hope that answers.
Thank you, Anuj. So the next question is from Lakshman. How do you support your customers in implementing their secret sauce into your multi-tenant OMS?
Okay. I need to understand what that secret sauce is. This is a joke famous in Flipkart that, we are Flipkart's secret sauce. Uh, but yeah, so I think the idea over here, right, I discussed about extensions. So what we allow, see, we understand by design, especially when we are externalizing our tech stack, that the business rules and policies of our customer will be centric, will be centric to their user base, their understanding of the business, and they'll any day have more understanding of their local customers that we can bring in despite our experience. So by design, the idea is that these extensions are pluggable, and there is the business logic, and there are various ways when it comes to implementing, where we ask them to we provide an SDK they can implement, and we just burn it dynamically, or we get some rules dynamically from their system in these extensions, and they work out of the box. But the main design is your secret sauce, right, where you allow your policy and rules to dictate the workflows. Your primitives are still the same.
Great. Next question from Tanuj. What real-time monitoring does Flipkart use during the peaks, especially with multi-tenant setup? And are there any key issues and quick fixes that you've had to implement during these peak sales times?
Wow, this is kind of nostalgic. Every year we have a large team, and we have big billion days coming up. So we have people doing these real time monitoring and facing those challenges exactly. So I think I mean I can't just even count on fingers, key issues and quick fixes, from your noisy neighbor. When you go to the issues, right, even your containers, your virtualization was a concept that actually strictly isolated workloads running on a single bare metal, but that also had noisy neighbor issues. Fast forward in the world of containerization, where you don't have such great isolation, these problems have magnified, right? So I mean, just saying, there are just ton loads of problem, from business to functional to tech, and with the all layers changing year over year, the combination it throws up is even more interesting, and one cannot predict. But what real time monitoring has truly helped us, right, what has been our real cockpit, is that we have by design, we think our systems will fail, right? Every engineer in Flipkart is actually told your systems will fail, Murphy's law will come true. So what we have done there is, because there is this inherent assumption systems will fail one day, or at scale, you have a fault tolerant design that is in place, right? And when what that fault tolerant design is, basically, if certain things fail, there is a fallback that is there, and there is a real time monitoring on top of that, which there are thousands of microservices that get called when people come to browse. Now, how quickly can I detect which one of them which one service out of those thousand is failing or is latent, right? I think curating those dashboards, building that network graph, service graph, right, being able to quickly analyze which is the longest pole, I think that fault tolerant design combined with chaos testing that we do, I think has helped it a great deal. We actually simulate failure scenarios. So I think that you can again say has been our secret sauce during our peak testing. Yeah.
Great. So it looks like the last question we have is from Praveen. Great concept about allowing the market to disrupt. You
Sorry,
okay
sorry,
with
sorry,
that?
sorry. Yeah, I just read it before you please complete for the others. Yeah.
Great concepts about allowing the market to disrupt, learning from it, and improvise. How do you convince leadership about this approach?
Yeah, sorry for sorry for that, but yeah, I think I can pass this because it's not a technical question, but okay, this is a tough one. But see, I think business also understands, right? I think what I've seen, and this is my own experience. This is non-technical stuff, so please don't hold me for that. If it does works, it does not work. Actually, you know, business I feel is also not unreasonable at times, right? Because in such a high competitive market, they actually need to think, what gets in the money. So I think if we are able to explain it to the business, and I feel that is truly tech leadership's job, right? Whether you're architects, whether you're, CTO, head of engineering, where they are able to actually tell something to the business in a language that they understand, right? In physics, we had this concept of reference frame, right? If you have to solve an equation, you need to come in the same reference frame. I think if we are able to come on in that same reference frame and they understand, okay, what would be the business loss? So they want a business growth, but they are also able to see, maybe they are able to do 0 to 1 journey, but for 1 to 10, if we are able to tell them, that will take longer if you continue with the current way, versus you have to solve for certain tech debts, right? There is a tech debt curve beyond which your business becomes unsustainable. I think if we are able to implement that culture, and the ownership lies on the tech leadership, frankly, more than the business, if we are able to explain that well, I think, they are reasonable people, reasonable human beings, and they also want the success. So I think probably it will make sense.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have a couple more questions that just trickled in, but we are approaching time, so I'll go through very quickly. How do you engage with customers to co-innovate and bring their unique fulfillment strategies into your product roadmap without having to create one-off custom builds?
Okay, I think these are like really wonderful questions, and I think a lot of experienced people looks like. So I think, like I said, right, we when we engage with our customers, the idea is, from our, I mean, the sales team gets the contact and understand the problem statement, but our product team is the one that drives those conversations from there on. And the idea is to first understand their problems before even, telling that we have a solution that exists. And in certain cases, we say, hey, we are pretty straightforward, saying, hey, this is something we don't solve out of the box. But, our product team thinks that this is something that can be generalized. This is something that should be a standard. This is not something which is a very custom kind of a use case. So we actually, do a quick POCs or experiments saying, is this something that will work as standard out of the box? So that's, in terms of the software aspect, engaging, and, product trying to include that in the roadmap. But then some of these things, like I mentioned, right? We know, like for OMS, we know even in a single tenant, right, with different business use cases, you can have different policies and rules. So if these fulfillment strategies are more about your business rules, right, more about, they are not fundamentally changing the primitives, I think those will be directly something that can be modeled as extensions and, given out of the box. Finally, if, we end up saying, okay, this is actually disrupting our design, we are actually happy about it because we get to learn, we know our design is not perfect, and we find a use case, and we follow the same thing like we discussed, right? We do a growth hack, we enable the use case, and then we actually solve for standardizing that in our product roadmap.
Interesting methodology. Thank you. Last question before we wrap up is from Ashwini. So, in your experience with asynchronous microservices, what specific challenges have you actually encountered and how did you address them? So, specifically as it relates to data consistency, maybe one microservice was down or there was erroneous ordering of deployment with schema dependencies.
Yeah, I think the question itself lays out the challenges and similar, right? Like it's a big funnel, and if you have many queues, many systems, there could be orders lying in your sideline queues, etc. And as and when you onboard your more business use cases, maybe in the overall stack rank of all use cases, it may have a low volume footprint, but for that use case itself, it's a big thing, right? So these are definitely certain realities that get played out. So I think again, I mean, we can go into the specific, but just for the paucity of time, the idea is to build these systems as eventual consistent systems, combined with a monitoring system that actually tells us there are messages in the funnel that are starving. Again, not locally optimizing, but globally optimizing. And it again comes back to primitives, right? An order has few states. If I zoom out, if there are a lot of orders that are stuck in one state, right? Doesn't matter which microservice, which sideline queue. If I'm able to track that as a starvation policy versus these specific implementations, I think these things get surfaced early, and then as part of that, either it'll point to a design issue where your systems were not consistent, and eventually were not designed for being eventually consistent, or it'll point to some code bug, the dreadful bugs. I think then it'll be a little iterative process. However, one interesting thing here to call out is, your workflow, I mean, and maybe that's a topic for another series. There are so many workflows that, they are out there in the industry for everything. I think the workflows and the queue, right? If we are able to draw the right spec for them, your infrastructure itself should be able to take this as a pattern and solve for it versus each microservice which is tasked for functional use case solving for this. I think that also helps guarantee correctness and standardization of the design patterns. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm just gonna, before we wrap up, I'm gonna ask you one last question. And so I know we've kind of talked about everything and anything under the sun right now. But if there was one big takeaway, or if, maybe there's lots of little takeaways, for today's audience, what, in your opinion, might that be?
Oh, so I think, yeah, focus on the primitives, right? Like the simple definitions of things. The beauty is they don't change quite a lot. Your workflows, your policies, your rules, your experience, those change. So if you have right primitives, uh, you know, stick to them and let your policies define, outcomes. And your outcomes can change over a period of time, and embrace that change, as the world evolves, but stick to the basics. Yeah.
Stick to the basics. I like it. All right. So then with that, that brings us to the close of today's Partner Power Up. So I just wanted to, issue you a big thank you, Anuj. I appreciate you for joining us today, sharing your insights. I appreciate the Flipkart Commerce Cloud, for again sponsoring this and sharing multi-tenant OMS architecture and all those goodies. So again, we really appreciate your time and perspective. And thanks to all the gurus that joined us today. And we're engaging in the conversation and discussion and also asked some really thoughtful, really good questions. So thank you for doing that. And so before we sign off, I just want to give a quick reminder that our next panel discussion is coming up on October 3rd. And that topic is going to be specifically around OMS in plain English. So it's B2B pain points and profitability. We have a really good group of panelists lined up for that one, so I hope everybody in the audience can join us for that. So mark your calendars, and with that, I wish everybody a wonderful weekend, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone. I mean, really interesting questions, right? I wish we had more time, but yeah,
Well, we'll have
thanks.
to have you back.
Nice. Have a
Thanks,
nice evening.
everyone.
Thank you.